Welcome to Focus BC. I'm Richard Zussman here in the hallways of the BC Legislature. Selina Robinson has walked these hallways many times as a senior cabinet minister for this government and as an NDP MLA. But she's an NDP caucus member no more, quitting this week over long-standing questions about anti-Semitism inside the NDP caucus and the decision she made to resign from cabinet. Selina Robinson joins me now. Selina, thank you so much for doing this.
Thanks for having me, Richard.
A lot has been said this week. Anyone who's watched the NewsHour has seen your comments you've made this week. But walk me through this decision you have made after resigning from cabinet now to quit the NDP caucus.
Well, certainly there's been a difficult 5 months for me, for the Jewish community here in British Columbia. The massacre that we witnessed in Israel, perpetrated by Hamas, has certainly had an impact. And I had been tasked by John Parker previously and then by David Eby to continue to engage with the Jewish community since we've been in government. It's my community. I grew up in the community and certainly have lots of relationships throughout the community. And so, as we have witnessed in so many communities right across, not just here in British Columbia, but across the country and around the globe, there's been a bit of an uprising, I would suggest, of people who have forgotten that 1,200 people were murdered, slaughtered, and mutilated back on October 7th. And of course, we're seeing the IDF retaliate and secure their borders as best they can. But what it's done is it's given rise to challenges in the Middle East and what's happening to Palestinian people who live in Gaza. And I'm horrified by what I am witnessing, as I think are most people. But what's happened in our streets and in our campuses and our colleges, we're seeing it now in civil society, we're seeing it in school districts, we're seeing it among teachers, we're seeing it in the public service. There are actions being taken that are designed to intimidate Jews here in British Columbia. The Jewish people feel afraid to wear a Star of David. They're feeling afraid to let people know that they're Jewish. I've actually, since I've left the caucus, I've had 3 local elected officials in our province who are Jewish, who live in smaller communities, let me know that they are Jewish, and they are afraid of letting people in their communities know that they are Jewish. And that's not acceptable. And that really worries me. We've seen a spike in anti-Semitism. We saw the Vancouver Police Department release figures seeing the spike since October 7th. And I have been bringing this to the Premier's attention. I've been bringing it to various ministers' attention. I've certainly been acting on it in my role that I had as the Minister for Post-Secondary Education, and speaking out and speaking to other leaders around. We all have a responsibility to keep people safe. And that just doesn't mean physically safe, but emotionally and spiritually safe. And we haven't been doing anything specific. We can't really point to anything. And that really concerns me. I had to leave because people were choosing to be silent.
You wrote a long letter, 5 pages. In part of it, you described the party as abandoning you. You took responsibility for the comments that you made about the land of Israel. Those comments were interpreted by the Muslim community as racist, and in turn, Premier David Eby and yourself had conversations that led to your resignation. At this point, when you reflect on that, do you believe that you should never have been forced to resign here? And what did you make of the comments that the Premier made on Thursday, saying that you still have a lot of work to do in the community, but needed to reflect himself on not giving you the space to be able to articulate your concerns directly to him?
So I did articulate my concerns to the Premier. I articulated them like early in October, right after the massacre, about my concerns about what I was seeing. I articulated them to him in December when I told him that I wasn't running again, and I let him know that part of what I was saying in caucus was really concerning to me, that was part of my decision. It wasn't the only reason I decided not to run again, but it certainly hasn't felt like the caucus that I started with. And so he was well aware of my concerns. The words that I used were not words that I intended to hurt anybody with, and that they had impact is in a way that was hurtful makes me very sad. And I have been reaching out to people in the Arab Muslim community in particular, and they accept my apology. They accepted my apology, and so the Premier says I have deep work to do. I pride myself on acknowledging that I said things that were hurtful to people. That wasn't what I was intending to do. And I'm happy to engage with those folks that I hurt and work with them to find a path forward, work with them as a Jewish person, and also to bring along other Jewish people to engage with the Arab Muslim community. And I have to say that the people that I've spoken with so far have been eager to do that with me. And that's why I pitched to the Premier I pitched it back in February, that I think that there's an opportunity here, and let's not waste that opportunity. Let's find a path forward. And part of it needs to be that my colleagues need to do some anti-Semitism training, not because they're vicious anti-Semites. That's not what I mean to imply. It's because they're being silent, because they're afraid of saying the wrong thing. I said something that hurt people, and I lost my job over it. I was told that I was no longer welcome as a member of cabinet. And so what that says to everybody else is better not say anything.
Let's focus in on the Jewish community. Your colleague, George Reimer, raised Jewish but no longer practicing, came out on Thursday and said, as a Jewish man, my interpretation of the caucus is different than Selina's. What do you make of the comments you heard from your now former colleague?
Well, I'm pretty disappointed. I'm disappointed that they would use another Jewish person to somehow suggest that everything was okay. And it's not me just saying that there's anti-Semitism within New Democrats. The Jewish community is saying it. In fact, I have a letter that I received from George's sister who said, wrote to the Premier about she's concerned about some of the things that Mabel Elmore said. And so, like, again, I suppose we all have our own experiences, but I'm speaking on behalf of the Jewish community, not just on behalf of Selina Robinson. The Jewish community is saying, and has been saying, this is not okay. We are hurt. So how is it that community leaders are saying in one community, we are hurt, and so we want the member to apologize and to do some things in order to maintain relationship with us? But when the Jewish community does the same thing, there's different rules or different expectations put on members of my caucus.
Selina, thank you so much for doing this.
Thank you, Richard.
George Reimer announced earlier this week as well, he is not running again. It was unrelated to all of this, but we'll speak to the two frontrunners hoping to replace him coming up after the break.
This is Focus BC on Global.
Welcome back. As I mentioned before the break, George Reimer has made the decision not to run again. All of that was announced before Selina Robinson quit the NDP caucus. Reimer was first elected in 2013, a high-profile member of both Horgan and Eby's cabinets. And now there's going to be a big race to replace him. Former Deputy Mayor in Vancouver, Andrea Reimer, taking on City Councillor Christine Boyle. I spoke earlier this week with Andrea Reimer. Thank you so much for doing this.
Yeah, it's a pleasure to join you. Thanks for having me on.
So you've been out of politics for a few years now. Why do you want back in?
Yeah, well, in politics, I think it's fair to say that you don't often get to choose your timing. Timing kind of chooses you. I've enjoyed private life and being able to be out of the public spotlight a bit, but I've never stopped working on the issues that I worked on when I was in politics. So I have a consultancy where I push forward climate action, bold climate action. I work with First Nations and non-First Nations governments to help advance reconciliation issues. I work with the Pan-Canadian Voice for Women's Housing. I've got a podcast about housing and particularly how the housing crisis has impacted women and gender diverse people. So I'm still working on all those issues, but I've also been very involved with George Heyman and his Vancouver Fairview, now Little Mountain with the boundary changes for many years. And he asked me some time ago now that when he was ready to step down, would I consider stepping up? I was a little lukewarm to the idea at first because I have enjoyed having a bit more of a private life, but I also see the problems that I care about have not gotten less, they only keep growing. And I feel like it was the right time. I did, Premier Eby reached out and we had a meeting. But he has passion on issues I'm passionate about, and I think importantly is prepared to show courageous leadership. I think people in the province have seen how this NDP government has really stepped up on housing. I've heard him say some very strong things about climate as we're looking at a potential change in federal government with some different ideas. Transportation, childcare, Indigenous issues are particularly important to me. On all of these areas, he's really shown some bold leadership, and I think we're going to see more bold leadership from him.
When you were a city councillor and deputy mayor under Vision, under Mayor Gregor Robertson, you focused on a lot of these issues, but there was also a lot of criticism that you did not do enough to address the housing crisis. You did not do enough to keep up with the growth that Vancouver was experiencing. What do you say to those critics, and how would a role in provincial politics be different from how things ended up in your time with Vision?
Yeah, well, and I think those criticisms are valid criticisms. I think anytime that you're in a government, it's hard to keep up with demand from the public for change, particularly in the case of my government, where we are coming in after many years of inaction on housing, many years of inaction on climate, and in a big way. There'd been some sort of narrow action, but we really needed to scale things up. Childcare, there'd been almost nothing done in the period before. Coupled with that, though, and this is hard to see now, but to backcast, we had a conservative government nationally that was quite hostile, in fact, to many of the key issues we were trying to move forward. They certainly weren't helping out on moving those issues. And even provincially, I mean, on a good day, it was neutral, but they were generally not in support of the greenest city housing at the time. They were putting little to no money into it. Were not concerned about renters and the plight of renters. And Vancouver is a renter city. It's a majority of renters live here in Vancouver. Transportation, I mean, I could go on. And so we were trying to, as a city government, do the work and fill the holes that was being left by a lack of action by the province and the federal government, and took that on. I mean, I've had people say, you could have just left that all alone, right? And not been saddled with being called a failure on things that actually were never your responsibility. I still think if I had to do it all over again, I would have pushed on those issues. But I think the real opportunity to make change on a lot of these issues is at the provincial level. And one of the reasons that I think I'm excited by the opportunity to scale up the work that I have done over my life.
We have about 30 seconds left. Entering provincial politics is different than municipal politics. You're part of a caucus, a government, a premier, cabinet, if the NDP does win the next election. How are things different in that regard? And are you excited to take on a potential different challenge there?
Oh, yeah. No, I've definitely considered that. I do think I bring a very uncommon set of personal experiences into government. I'm a lifelong renter. I'm transit dependent. I come from working class roots. I was adopted out of my community. I've been reconnecting with my birth family and my Indigenous culture. I think these things would be welcome at the cabinet table. Nobody ever gets everything they want in a government, but I think being able to come in and advocate on behalf of people that traditionally haven't had advocates with their experience at that table. I think the kind of endorsements I've been getting from people like Chief Stuart Phillip and Melanie Mark and Carl Salem speak to how important it is to those communities. And I think I am someone who could bring a strong voice into the caucus.
Andrea, thanks so much for doing this.
Yeah, thanks for having me on.
Andrea Reimer will be taking on Vancouver City Councillor Christine Boyle in this race, and Councillor Boyle joins me now. Thank you so much for doing this.
Thanks for having me on.
Why do you want to be the nominee for the NDP in Vancouver-Little Mountain?
I've spent years and years working on issues that are important in Little Mountain and quite frankly across Vancouver and across BC, working on issues of affordability and housing, climate action, and more at the municipal level. And I see an incredible opportunity to be part of a strong team that is doing really important work on all of those files in Victoria.
George Heyman, the incumbent, has already endorsed your opponent. Do you believe you're an anti-establishment candidate here in this race?
I don't think so, but I do think I strike that balance. I've been working at the municipal level and I've been a longtime NDP member. And also I see the need for big changes. I hear that all the time from residents, and I'm proud of the track record that the BC NDP has. They've accomplished a lot, and also there's a lot more to do, and I am keen to be part of that work and push hard to make sure we're addressing the issues that people keep telling us are important. We know there's always more to do, and I'm ready to get to work on it.
How would your experience on council help as a nominee, and then if everything works out, as an MLA in this province?
I certainly, day after day, see and hear from residents about the pressing issues that they're facing, really around affordability, around housing. And I have a strong track record of working on those issues and getting results. And I have been doing that work around tables that are politically diverse. And I have a track record of building bridges and working with folks who I am not necessarily exactly aligned with. I think those are important skills to bring to Victoria, to be part of a team and to be bringing forward tangible solutions that address those issues, to be working across the aisle or across disagreements.
This is a high-profile nomination. It is two extremely high-profile candidates. If things don't work out for you in this riding, would you consider seeking a nomination or having a conversation with the Premier about potentially running somewhere else for the NDP?
I'm saving that conversation for down the road, but I do think nomination races are healthy. They reflect well on the party if we can do them well, and I have a lot of respect for Andrea. I look forward to the conversations that we can have, and whoever wins Little Mountain will have a strong champion, and I will be out there door knocking, whether it's myself or Andrea as the candidate.
I also look forward to watching those conversations unfold. Thank you so much for doing this.
Thanks for having me on.
It would be an understatement to say it has been a monumental and important week for the NDP, in a sense, a reckoning. We'll have more of that conversation with Keith Baldry coming up after the break.
This is Focus BC on Global.
Welcome back. Keith Baldry joins me now. So Keith, obviously a lot to unpack from what we've seen this week.
Oh yeah.
We're looking at a nomination battle coming up. We've had these conversations around anti-Semitism in cabinet. Like, if we see nasty nomination battles, intense rivalries between, can the party survive considering how it seems like they're in a real perilous position here?
Oh, sure. I mean, look, if the NDP was in opposition right now, I think it'd be a different story. They're in government, and government sort of invokes a bit of discipline on a caucus and on a party that's not necessarily there when they're in opposition. So you see these nomination fights. You're not seeing nomination fights for the BC United or BC Conservatives. They're basically appointed candidates for the most part. NDP, because the potential is to be in government right now. I mean, if an election were held today, the NDP would likely, win 70 seats or 80 seats, and that may be the case coming October. So that's why you're seeing this intense interest in nominations. We see a five-way fight in Powell River, for example, two high-profile candidates we've had on this program today in Vancouver-Little Mountain. You're not seeing that in other parties because the prospect of going into government is there for the NDP, and that invokes a bit of discipline that you don't see in one of the parties in opposition. Now, given what happened with Selina Robinson, that was a bit of a mini nuclear bomb that happened here this week. But it's interesting to see no one in the caucus is supporting Selina Robinson. I mean, they're supporting her, saying we're with you, we're your friend, but they don't agree with her assessment of her allegations of anti-Semitism within the caucus. Having said that, the political left around the world has been riven by the issue of Israel versus non-Israel position. British Labour Party torn apart under Jeremy Corbyn for that. The Federal Green Party has had serious problems with that issue, as is the Federal NDP. The BC NDP has sort of kept that in check until Selina Robinson did what she did, but even after that, we don't see those same sort of divisions happening within that party.
Is this a test of David Eby's leadership? We saw him earlier this week where he walked just around the corner here and took questions in a style that we haven't seen from him, I don't think, since he's become premier. Took all the questions. There was no control from his staff. They just said, you guys have at him. You ask him whatever you want until 9:30. And he stood there and said, and Selina Robinson questioned some of the things he said, but largely took on all the questions and said, I have a responsibility here too. My caucus is hurting. I'm hurting, Selina Robinson's hurting, and we need to do the work to fix that. A meeting with rabbis in Vancouver community as well was already organized, but the conversation has switched. What does he need to prove that he can get through this test?
Well, it is a test of his leadership, and again, it goes back to the original decision to remove Selina Robinson from cabinet. That raised some questions whether he was caving into pressure from extra parliamentary forces. We've made the point before, when Selina, the controversy first erupted, it was interesting, the political opposition did not take a view that she should apologize or walk her comments back. So you had this extraordinary situation where the opposition or the controversy around a cabinet minister had nothing to do with the legislature. It had everything to do with extra parliamentary opposition. And some critics have said Eby sort of caved into that opposition that was outside the legislature. Others said no, it played out the way it was supposed to play out. This is an ongoing test of David Eby's leadership. It started with Selina Robinson when she first got into some controversy. It's not ending just because she's left caucus. It will continue until this controversy dies down.
And in terms of dying down, we're going to hear from the Jewish community. They're concerned that there is a double standard here. We saw a number of MLAs walk by here who have made comments that Robinson, a Jewish woman, described as anti-Semitic. Mm-hmm. You then see the online community coming out and saying, oh, those aren't anti-Semitic comments. What Selina Robinson said was far worse. In our society, it is not up to us to judge whose comments are worse. It is, in essence, a shared experience that individuals have, and that's what makes, I think, one of the strengths here from the NDP caucus is there's a diversity there. But how do they show to the public that they have reined in some of these comments that they have made in the past that have been perceived by the Jewish community as anti-Semitic?
Well, first of all, by not making the comments again. But it was interesting to see Mabel Elmore come out of the caucus room just around the corner here, hold a scrum with reporters, denying Selina Robinson's allegations that she was making anti-Semitic comments. I found also even more troubling was the BC United Party brought up some incidents of anti-Semitism within the civil service and circulated some anecdotal information about a half dozen instances of potential anti-Semitic comments in the civil service.
Thanks, Keith, and thank you so much for watching us here on Focus BC.